Welcome back. If you're just joining us, you're watching Sunday edition here on KTN News. Let's now talk about some politics. Let's start with the National Super Alliance. Yesterday, they did have their first joint political rally after signing that agreement with a 7-point agenda. And we did hear some of them speaking at the historic 64 Stadium in Eldoret. Let's listen in to what some of them had to say.
Na hata Uhuru amekuwa waziri wa fedha, lakini mimi nashangaa yale madeni yanaweka sahihi akijaza. How does he expect these Kenyans to survive? Kwa sababu jukumu kubwa kwa serikali ambayo inakuja ya NASA, jukumu la kwanza litakuwa kupambana na madeni ambayo ni ya bandia.
Amani National Congress ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi, one of the 4 men seeking for that presidential ticket for the National Super Alliance. Dismas, what did you take out from that rally yesterday in Eldoret, which is the home, practically speaking, of the Deputy President William Ruto, and maybe the crowd? What did you take out from that?
For me, 3 things come out. For the crowd, again, for people who have ever done politics, know that it's about mobilization. So there's a chance that up to 50% of the guys who are in that crowd, they did not leave home on their own motion. There must have been an incentive, maybe 50 shillings or 100 shillings for them to show up for the rally. So you cannot really use the rally to measure anything. Although for perception it's very good, for optics purposes, right. NASA would easily say we've got a crowd in Rift Valley. But I think the most important message which came out yesterday was the statement of unity, that the 4 NASA principals will be doing their campaigning together. But most important, the message yesterday they were driving home is around corruption in Kenya, about family and friends. And that message was delivered by Raila Odinga, trying to remind Kenyans that all the corruption that has been taking place in Kenya cannot be blamed on an ethnic community. Like, for instance, if somebody has been accused of interfering with public resources at Afya House, you cannot claim that it's the Kikuyus, that it's now going to be an issue of family and friends. And I think that's the message that NASA wants to use to create voter apathy in Central Province. And then the second message came from Musalia Mudavadi, right, about the challenges that Jubilee is facing in managing the economy. He spoke about the growing debt that, according to World Bank and IMF, is unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And in the past, Jubilee, or rather, NASA has been accused that they've been telling people we want to kick out Jubilee, but they never told us what they're going to do. I think yesterday was a very good attempt for them to tell us that when we kick out Jubilee, our priority is going to be to manage the economy. And it's not from nowhere that Musalia Mudavadi spoke about it, because Musalia Mudavadi at some stage he was Minister for Finance. And what you see today is about what happened when he was 32 years, when he took over the Ministry of Finance, that nobody wanted to speak with President Moi. But at a tender age of 32 years, he was able to re-establish relationships with the Bretton Woods institution so that we got that credit support that the nation needed. And that's the reason why Kenya is in trouble today. Mr. Mbogo and company have been running to the east, they've been going to the west, doing massive borrowings. I'm not an economist, but I'm aware. By the time Kibaki was leaving office, we had a debt of 800 billion. But Mbogo and company have been borrowing 700 billion every year. And this money is not going to projects that Wanjiku can actually see on the ground. The other day, the DP indicated that they've put up 10,000 kilometers of tarmac road. And if that road would have been anywhere, you'd have seen the multiplier effect. When I come back from the village, if somebody is putting up a basic house valued at 10 million, and that they're buying the raw materials, you actually get to feel the effect, because you see Mama Mboga selling a lot of githeri and stuff like that. But for all this money that Mboga has been borrowing, you don't see the multiplier effect in Kenya. Because if you are doing a road from wherever in Kenya, you should be able to see a lot of the resident engineers around driving those top-of-the-range white Land Rovers. You should be able to see Mama Mbogas, people working and, having value from that resource. But that has not been seen. And so, I think yesterday for NASA, they made a very good attempt.
That was one of the key messages. And Brian, the headline on the Standard says NASA raids Rift Valley. Very hard-hitting statements against Deputy President William Ruto. Do you think that hurts you Jubilee?
You know, if you give me a public address system and a few comedians, I can pull the same crowd as they did. Nowadays in TV, we don't have enough comedy to go check it out, and that's why people went there to see the masses.
So
even
they're feeling
acrobats
ridiculous.
in town, even acrobats in town, mad people, they attract some level of crowd.
Are you sure you want to discredit this crowd? I mean, it was not
What
a
I can
full
say,
60.
what Dylan can say,
When
when you're in politics, you know what it takes to have such crowds. And you can tell genuine crowds from those paid up crowds. So it's very easy to see where that came from.
All right.
Number two, Dismas has said something about debts, and he said he's not an economist. I can tell you for a fact that...
Because you're an economist.
I can tell you for a fact in one thing. The Jubilee debt you're seeing is something visible. Like the biggest debt it was taken is for SGR, which will be live in 1st June. If you've traveled enough in this country, you can tell, I've moved from county to county, and you can tell everywhere you find roads being tarmacked, everywhere in the country. The other day we finished the Garissa-Moyale stretch from where you came from.
At what cost?
Whatever the cause, you're saying that you don't see anything and the multiplier effect. But you can tell now the counties, what they're doing the feeder roads now with Maram, because most roads, main roads are tarmacked there.
Right.
Number two, when Musalia Mudavadi was the Minister for Finance, that's when Goldenberg took place under his watch. That was the Kenya biggest scandal to
Right.
date.
Right.
So he cannot try to lecture us on matter public finance that he does not understand. It's one thing.
What do you say about the issue of the debts?
That's what I'm saying. The debt you're seeing is like something like SGR. It's an investment of over 100 years. SGR will not be carrying cargo free of charge. It will not be carrying passengers free of charge. SGR itself will pay for itself from those revenues. That's number one. Number two, it's only this period when you're seeing debt being taken and you're seeing actual results. You know, this is the first government to implement devolution. The governors, they don't care where the money will come from, but they want, at the end of the day, they have their monies in-house. So you find the Minister for Finance has a lot of work to try and get funds for all this project. Because, number one, salaries account for almost 40% of our revenue. Number two, we have devolution, which it's a must, it's constitutional. They have to be given money. Number three, we have pension. Those three stuff cost like 40% of our money.
Yes,
so,
But allow me to quickly buttress the point he's indicated, which is tiptoeing around it. He's failed to tell us that, in fact, a third of our budget gets lost through corruption. So in as much as we're getting a lot of money, say, for SGR, and again, one wonders whether there was actually a study done to ask ourselves, did we need to do SGR or would have done a road?
let me tell you this much for a fact. If you understand public finance and how economy works, is Kenya transportation cost is one of the highest in the region. And what Jubilee is doing is laying the groundwork for a fine takeoff. You see, we cannot compete with Egypt in transport.
All right.
We cannot compete with Egypt in energy. So these are the costs that make our doing business very expensive. You can see with SGR, it will take a day to move goods from Mombasa to the border.
All right. What Brian is defending is what Dismas was punching holes on, and that is the message by NASA. I want you to talk to us about, Daktari, whether that message is making sense to the electorate in whichever part of the country. But before then, let's listen into the rest of the NASA principles. That is, of course, Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, Wetangula, and Raila Odinga speaking yesterday at the 64 Stadium in Eldoret.
We are now going down to the grassroots. We are not going to be talking about another stolen election. We are going to make sure there will be no stolen election. These people are going home in daylight.
We are going to show our colleagues how to run the affairs of a country because they have demonstrated and shown how not to run a country.
Tukishika tukielekea kule mbele, tuhakikisha kwamba vijana wanapata haki yao. Hao jamaa waliambia ati 30% ya youth haipatikani, na ukipewa hulipwi, unaweza kungoja mwaka mzima.
Na hata Uhuru amekuwa waziri wa fedha, lakini mimi nashangaa yale madeni yanaweka sahihi akijaza. How does he expect these Kenyans to survive? Kwa sababu jukumu kubwa kwa serikali ambayo inakuja ya NASA, jukumu la kwanza litakuwa kupambana na madeni ambayo ni ya bandia.
4 principals they are speaking yesterday at the 64 Stadium in Eldoret. Daktari, is that message that the NASA principals are having, is it sinking?
Allow me, Ben, to start from the 7-point plan.
Yes.
And say that the person who designed that 7-point plan from a strategist perspective, I'll tell you that he did a shoddy job. And they may want to go back and relook at those 7 points, if they really want to have 7 points. The reason being that if you look at point 1, which is national reconciliation, then you look at point number 2, which talks about injustices, and number 3, which is equality. All these points can actually be encapsulated into one. Secondly, if you start at this point in time to say you will address the natural or the previous injustices, and you remember that the historical injustices are those that led us to 2007 and that particular message, you know, you start creating a lot of phobia and fear among the electorate. So that is a message that they would have even put under national reconciliation, because if you are going to reconcile, you are going to first of all look at the historical issues and so forth. But if you are going out there to campaign, you cannot go with such a pillar out there and expect to have across-the-board kind of support. Now, if you look at the pillar number 6 and pillar number 7, you are looking at something they are talking about poverty, addressing poverty. Then pillar number, that is pillar number 7, and pillar number 6, they talk about improving the economy. I mean, these are two which again have some relationship. So in strategy, we'll talk about incest of pillars. So in a nutshell, they only have one pillar which will stand alone, which is maybe enhancing devolution, and then collapse these two to have 3 pillars. Now, those pillars did not come out very, very well in their messaging yesterday. But coming to specifically yesterday, I must say this, that for the first time, I was very glad that the NASA team remained in context, and especially the message that was delivered by Musalia Mudavadi was very, very contextual and touched to the area within which he was operating. Remember, he was able to relate to like training from MTRH, compared it to Makerere, which are not far apart in terms of fees. He was able to talk about agriculture and the cost of maize and cost of planting and the money in the pockets, and that message was also repeated by Raila Odinga. And so it was very contextual. And then these issues of public debt and so forth, they managed to remain on issues and issue-based politics in terms of messaging. The only concern that I would have is that when it comes to politics, you remember sometimes back, Raila would have supporters and right-hand men like Otieno Kajwang who would mop emotions and whip up euphoria and excitement in crowds before he would then speak. NASA currently is very flat. That attempt to create some sort of euphoria which would then create a mass movement is yet to come out, and they would likely have to go back to the strategy board again and look for a way in which they can actually be able to mop emotions of the people and whip the emotions of the people. And I agree with Dismas finally on the issue of the people who attended that crowd. If you saw the convoy all the way as they were coming in, the locals in Eldoret were standing on the sidelines of the streets as they observed from their shops, as they observed from their kiosks and so forth. But then when you now go to the stadium, then you found the supporters who may have come from all over the place.
All right. What's your analysis?
Ben, on the issue of TJRC, since the parties have spoken about it, if you have the right kind of mind, the right kind of person to handle truth, justice, and reconciliation, it will be done very comfortably so. There are a lot of pains right now in the Ministry of Education, but there are reforms going on. I think the biggest problem is we announce too much of what we intend to do and scare the people. If your grandfather was snatched land and you today are pauper because your grandfather's land was snatched, honestly, it would be better if that person is either compensated or his land returned. So I do not think, per se, that TJRC is a wrong concept. Now, on this NASA crowd, I am worried about this crowd for one reason, that this would make NASA coalition to sleep. Because what I've seen, at least from NAC and CORD previously, these gentlemen thought they have won an election and actually went to slumber. So for me, this big crowd actually makes me fear that there is likelihood that Raila Odinga would go to slumber. Now, in terms of the 7 points that they have given us, I don't think they are that bad. Of course, it's a way issue of semantics and how they are framed. If there is anything Kenyans believe Raila Odinga will do, it is to strengthen devolution and allow money to flow to mashinani. Whether he will completely eradicate poverty, that is neither here nor there. Poverty has been there. It was there in the times of Jesus. It will be there, but we should minimize it now.
Right.
So I think, I just want to say that if there's anything people believe through these crowds and the NASA taking power, it's about the fact that they will give devolution.
I think to add on that
strength.
first, yes. When you talk about NASA crowds there, you can tell there was no local leader in vicinity.
There was no
elected leader from those areas they visited. But when you see Deputy President going to somebody like somewhere like Kakamega, you get leaders from that region accompanying the Deputy President. And number two, what he has said about NASA ability to eradicate poverty. You know, right now we have NASA governors. We've not seen anything different what they're doing from other governors. If it's true that they can strengthen devolution, their governors should be examples of what's supposed to be done with devolution. Number two, all those people in the lineup for NASA have been in government longer time than the current president and the deputy president. And there's nothing tangible that the four principles can show what they've done while in government. So I don't see anything new from what they're telling us, because Musalia himself was a minister for finance. What did he do? Nothing. Wetangula was in foreign affairs. What I know, the legacy is just he sold the
you can't say nothing.
Raila says he'll empower the youth, but in his prime ministership, he was the one who ate kazi kwa vijana funds. So I don't see anything.
Let's focus on the message.
Allow me, Ben, to just have a rejoinder on the issue of Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission before this mess comes in. Remember that during the 2007 post-election violence, and this is usually what happens in terms of messaging, that the person who releases the message may have very good intentions. But because this is a campaign messaging, you must be able to package it in a manner that even the interpretation of the person who is receiving is same as the person who is giving it. And that is what gives validity to your message. So it may be a good idea to have national, to address and implement the TJRC report. But who receives this message? Do they interpret it to mean that you are telling them to go and pick what was their land historically? Do they interpret it to mean that you are saying them, you are advising them to uproot people from their own areas and communities? So that is something that they need to look at in terms of messaging.
All right. I want to respond to something. Jubilee is selling the agenda of national unity. That is what they have been selling, saying this country has been at war. They want to unite the country. Now NASA is saying they want people to reconcile. Which message is more regional? Who's
okay, that's a loaded question, but before I come into that, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Mbugua for introducing alternative facts, as Donald Trump would refer them to. That Mr. Musalia Mudavadi created Golden Bag. In fact, Mr. Musalia Mudavadi is the one who stopped Golden Bag when he was appointed Minister for Finance. And you raise a very important issue. What did he do when he was at the Treasury? He's the one who re-established links with the Bretton Woods institution. That's very important. Now, when Jubilee talks about national unity, and we know for a fact that at this cabinet, even if you just go to one ministry, if you go, say, to the Ministry of Finance or you go to the Ministry of Energy, and I say this with a lot of humility to your boss, but most likely you're going to see the various positions populated by members of two nations. Chances are very high that it's going to be the Kalenjin nation and the Kikuyu nation. For instance, if you go to the Attorney General's office, you ask yourself, who is the Auditor General? Who is the Solicitor General? If you go to the Ministry of Finance, who is the Minister for Finance? Who is the Principal Secretary for Finance? You look at the Economic Secretary, all those positions. You'll see members of only two communities. So I don't know whether that's really national unity. Or maybe Jubilee now, because of the alternative facts, they've got their own definition of national unity. And for NASA, when they talk about reconciliation, the way Ishmael has indicated, they will not give a blueprint on how they're going to reconcile the nation. They're just jumping all over and saying that we are going to do reconciliation. That message was not broken down. But Ben, the most important thing out of the 7-point agenda, if you know about reconciliation and everything else, is the issue they've raised about corruption. And corruption is very key because right now, the Jubilee administration is accused of doing business with the government. You are a cabinet secretary, you are a president, or you're the deputy president, and your family members are doing business with the government of the day. Meaning that most of the decisions are driven by vendor interest or procurement interest. And it's unfortunate that most of the vendors today are the ones who are running the government of the day. Mbogo will be reluctant to tell you who is behind the rural electrification. And if he's honest, and most of the time he is, he'll tell you the one senior Jubilee politician is the one who is supplying those concrete poles. So the intention for them is not to have Wanjiku to have power, but to supply concrete poles. And NASA now has said that if they have the opportunity to run government, they'll not allow senior members to do business with government. And that's the reason why economies like Singapore, South Korea, Germany, Britain have made progress, because when you are a public servant, yes, you remain a public servant. If you are a politician, you do not do business with the government. Right now, Donald Trump is in trouble by the Oversight Committee because they're saying from the time he took office, all of a sudden his hotels are witnessing increased traffic. Because now people want to go do business with the US, or people want to go and have a conversation with Trump, they find it very easy to book into his hotels or do cocktails in his hotels. And people are beginning to say, no, there's going to be a conflict of interest. But for Jubilee, there's no conflict when a cabinet secretary supplies products to the same ministry.
All right.
And if NASA is able to kill that, so that we have a public service which serves 190.
Do you think that what Disma is saying has been, a lot has been rampant in Jubilee administration?
In a democracy, you can't invite things that Dismas is saying. You see, if my brother is the president, I do not expect him to come and feed me with my family. If I am qualified to participate in such activities, the law allows me to participate. So whatever Dismas is saying is out of this world. So all those people whose family member, politician and in government should not work and wait for them to be given stipends.
All right. What the NASA principal, Raila Odinga, said was, they will make sure that if you are a state officer, you don't do
How can you believe him? When he nominated his brother to parliament, his sister is the deputy governor, he wants his daughter to be the
that's an
MP for
elected
Kibera.
position.
So there's nothing you can lecture us on that while you're not practicing it in the position you're in right now.
But just allow me to pose one question. One of the major achievements Jubilee brought on board is to assign 30% of the contracts to marginalized people, women, youth, and there are accusations that the president's sister go to that contract. Would you actually tell us that, in fact, the president's sister is marginalized, that she has to have access to that contract?
The law says women, youth, and persons with disabilities. It does not say marginalized women, marginalized youth. The law categorizes them as marginalized. The entire population of women, the entire population of youth, and the entire population of persons with disabilities. So whatever you're saying, it's your own creation.
Ben,
Yes,
I just want to...
Ben,
I just want to say this. In fact, this is exactly the malady. This is the sickness we have as a nation. When when you call A, there is no other letter between A and B. But you're trying to say there is some letter here which we need to appreciate. Look, in all developed nations and economies, if you come from a first family, for example, the way you walk has to be very circumspect in terms of trading with the nation, with the government. It is true that if she qualifies, she can be given a tender. What's the big deal? But what are the logistics for her qualifying? Did she trample on some ordinary citizen who would have been given the tender? So I think if...
what do you mean by ordinary?
Ordinary what?
Citizen.
I mean, like me and you. You get, so that you don't say.
All right. Let's
focus,
gentlemen.
Allow me to.
Sorry, Ben. We don't want to be victimized here. I'm just saying this from the. I'm just following cue from what you have discussed.
Let me let him respond to that, and then
the question is this: when I come from the first family, am I given allowance because I'm coming from the first family?
No,
I should not
but
look for source of
when we
livelihood.
go to the office,
other
you
time,
and
when
me-
when the brother to the former president was shown living in poverty, people are complaining. Oh, your brother is the president. There's nothing you're doing.
He
with it."
probably didn't work hard.
You know, Kenyans, they are hypocritical completely.
All right, fair enough. Sorry, quickly.
My thinking is this, Ben, that when it comes to these issues, they are very, very believable if they are coming from NASA. But remember, NASA has had a very wonderful opportunity with the 24 counties and now 2 NASA-leaning counties in terms of county governments. That is the Meru one and together with Bomet. What has happened with these county governments in terms of posing questions? Is it likely that when we go to these counties, we are not going to see any conflict of interest in terms of both the luminaries together with the governments? Take a case in point of the doctors' strike, for instance. On one hand, you have the Council of Governors Health Committee chaired by one Ongwae. On one hand, Ranguma. And in that committee, there is also Ongwae. In fact, he has been very instrumental in the negotiations. They are the ones who went to court and asked the court to jail the doctors for contempt of court. On the other hand, there is Senator Mutula Kilonzo and Senator Orengo defending the doctors. So it is NASA as the complainant, NASA as the defendants. And then now you see the public is made to believe that the NASA believes in the implementation of CBA. If NASA, for instance, wanted to have political mileage on this, they would have called all their governors and told their governors, we believe in this CBA, we know it is expensive. Is it possible to pick some items which are implementable? For instance, the doctors want a resting room, they want a bed, they want some fuel and ambulance to go and collect them when they are going for late night emergencies and so forth. Is it possible? And that message would have come out very, very strongly. If we go to these NASA county governments, is it possible that we are likely to see that when NASA skewed or NASA leaning county governments want to hold conferences and workshops, are we likely to find that they hold them in hotels that are skewed towards the NASA luminaries?
Yeah.
So those are the questions that Kenyans would be asking, and they would also be able to do a comparative analysis of how you've been able to undertake and perform with the little resources you are with, so that you are given the bigger resources.
All right, let's wrap it up concerning NASA, and one of the things they didn't talk about in that 7-point agenda, what they were signing was the elephant in the room, really, like concerning their unity and what method they are going to use to nominate their presidential flag bearer, and that has raised unity queries. I was in Eldoret yesterday, and the plan was that the 4 principals will land at the Eldoret airport, then they'll go to Sirikwa Hotel, and then they will make a procession into town, address, meet the people as they make their way to the stadium. So these 2 gentlemen, Moses Wetangula and Kalonzo Musyoka, went to a hotel called Power Place. Raila Odinga went to Sirikwa, and then he went to the stadium before them. Then they had to follow him later, and then Musalia Mudavadi came in like about 20 minutes later. Do you read some kind of disunity?
You know, the
president comes in last normally.
Yeah, well, but again, you notice that there's...
Or is it a message? It's a coded message.
No, you know, they've, from the time they started NASA, the 4 principals have done away with the protocol. Because it's always expected that the last person to speak is the senior most. And in all those events, previously, during CORD, it used to be Wetangula, Kalonzo, and Raila. But now they seem to have moved it around. But suffice to say that the 4 principals have no love. There's no love lost among the 4. They are political enemies, and all of them have got a small sword hidden at the back. So they're waiting for the earliest opportunity to stab each other. And as they wait for the committee of 12 to come up with the presidential candidates, each of them would like to raise their profile. Each of them would like to do things in a manner that if, say, the committee of 12 decides to do a public opinion to find out who is going to be, who is running, then they'll be number 1. So if anybody says that the NASA team is not united, that's a lie, because they've never been united. There's no ideological unity that's saying that we are pushing in the same direction. All of them want to step on the shoulders of each other for them to take office. So if even during the launch of, when they were signing the framework, you notice that Musalia Mudavadi walked in with Wetangula, or rather with Musalia. Then after a few minutes, Kalonzo came in with Wetangula. So they are doing all this drama to make Mbogwa and company happy. And you notice, the person who is actually worried about the NASA presidential flag bearer is not the NASA supporters, is William Ruto. He's the one who keeps on saying that wala wajajipanga, they don't know who it is.
All right.
But if you look at history, Ben, in 2002, nobody knew that Kibaki was going to run. And even during the last election, nobody knew that it was going to be President Kenyatta. And even right now, Mbogo will not accept. And I can be quoted on this. We don't even know, as we sit today, we don't know the Jubilee presidential candidates.
Let's ask Jubilee. I mean,
yes, we don't know the Jubilee presidential candidates.
Which ticket do you fear most? I mean, I'm not sure you tell us anyway.
I'm not fearing any ticket, my friend. What I can tell you, I don't know which one Dimas lives in. Because in 2002, Ngilu, Wamalu, and Kibaki had Kibaki as their candidate.
When did they make the name?
In 2002.
When was the name pronounced?
Kibaki has been running throughout the race. So you can't say they didn't know who the candidate was. Now, in NASA, they're giving us side shows. 12-member committee, I don't know, 7-point agenda.
And you're very worried.
Well, we are not worried.
You're running around town.
It's them who is postponing their problems because everybody wants to know their presidential candidate and who will run away. Listen.
What would you be worried if the enemy camp is in trouble?
You know, in a football match, in Manu, for example, Ferguson used to say Rooney will not play so that the opponent does not plan with Rooney in mind. Now, NASA, they're trying to treat us to some sideshow, which they know fallout will be imminent after they've named of their presidential candidate. And that 12-member committee is useless. It's only the 4 principals who will decide.
All right.
Whatever that 12-member committee will do, I don't think it will be.
Before I come to Daktari, let's speak to Evans, calling us from I think, Busia. Evans, good morning. Hello, Evans, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yes. What do you think about our discussion? What do you think about NASA?
I think NASA is very serious on the issues they are trying to put across the Republic.
Okay.
I think if these issues are not tackled in an urgent way,
right,
they will score a lot of. They will get more votes because if economic crisis which we are experiencing in the country,
yes,
is not being taken serious, and insecurity,
all right,
the debts which are incurred, health sector crisis, education sector crisis, nepotism and tribalism. If these are not going to be solved by Jubilee government, I think it is high time NASA will get more votes from their strongholds.
All right, Evans, quick one. Are you a NASA supporter?
I'm just an analyst. I'm seeing the problems we are encountering in the Republic of Kenya.
All right. Which presidential ticket pairing would be most lethal for NASA in your analysis?
In my analysis, I think it is not yet time to reveal, but I think who is going to be given that ticket,
right,
to give a Jubilee a run for their money.
I think you're a NASA supporter. But thank you, Evans, for calling in from Busia. We also have Mike calling us from Mombasa. Mike, what do you think about the latest intrigues from NASA?
Good morning, Ben.
Morning.
Morning to our panelists.
All right.
Right, I highly appreciate this opportunity. Now, I have several points to make, right?
Okay.
About the latest interest from the NASA is that now we can see that things are shaping up, and a lot of NASA supporters, from particular where I come from, I can say they are now putting on a face of confidence. Now they can see that there's that semblance of some unity that we've been looking for in these leaders.
All
and
right.
another point I would like to raise, and very quickly, is that I've heard about this talk about leadership, and that we had some phrases that have been leadership, like the likes of, if you look at all the NASA principles, actually have been in the helm of, they've been in government for some time. They've been in the government in the past. And of course, we have the current regime that is led by Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. The truth is that we cannot say that they have been in government and they couldn't do this. But we should also remember that we had a powerful minister called William Ruto in the past government, and we also had a very powerful deputy prime minister as a finance minister then, that is President Uhuru Kenyatta. So the argument that they have been in government and couldn't do anything, I will also ask the same questions. Did these two, did the...
All right, Mike, quick question here. Do you think the NASA message is reverberating among the electorate, among their supporters, and maybe even the undecided voters?
Oh, yes, to a very large extent it is. And in particular, let me just single out one issue, one of these points, like talk about the TJRC and national reconciliation and all that stuff. Now, I can guarantee you, like, if you look at the cost per se, let's just dwell on the cost, for instance. If you look at the cost across the board, is that the TJRC issue really resonates with the electorate down here. In fact, I can tell you for one thing, is that we have seen a lot of Jubilee machinations out here, and I can guarantee you, come this election, you'll see what will definitely be a shocker for Jubilee, because what they're trying to do has never resonated with the people out there. All right, you've talked about the crowds, and I've had one of the panelists address this issue, talking about stage-managed kind of crowds, and well, to some extent, that is very true, particularly for the coast. We have seen youths wearing Jubilee T-shirts and all that stuff, but that really doesn't reflect the will of the people. And to give you a reason why is this true, is that look at it this way. We've had individuals who said that they've crossed from the opposition, they've gone to Jubilee, and they've never had the audacity to say that they would want to, say, go for by-election, because they know one thing, is that by trying to go for by-election, they'll definitely lose. And by the way, these are just...
Good points, good points. Thank you, Mike. So, thank you, Mike. Mike there from... Mike there calling us from Mombasa. Very good points he has there. But I need us to wrap up this NASA issue. And I was asking you, Daktari, according to your analysis, what do you think would be that ticket that Jubilee is most worried about?
The ticket that would have been, which I'm not likely to see, and the sentiments actually came out yesterday, but before that, you remember actually the tensions that you are talking about manifested on live television. There was, at some point, somebody who was carrying or lifting the Raila Odinga's poster, and Wetangula was the one holding the microphone, and you remember him insisting and telling the gentleman to put that thing down. You were there anyway, yes. You saw. So that just shows you that there are still some intrigues in terms of getting the right candidate for them. But looking at the combination, for me, a ticket that would have been, which will not be, is that of Musalia Mudavadi as the presidential candidate and Kalonzo Musyoka as a running mate. And it is only informed by various issues. One, that Western Kenya, where Musalia Mudavadi comes from, has been in the position of deputy president or vice president, as it were, for a very long time. So any offer that is not presidential will not be able to really motivate the voters there to go to vote. So they may not vote for Jubilee, but they will not wake up again to vote for NASA. So there will be a voter apathy. And in this case, and I think one analyst has already picked it out very well, voter turnout is really going to matter. Secondly, Musalia Mudavadi attracts support from the Rift Valley, parts of the Rift Valley. He would likely have people who support him because of the historical relationship between his late father and Daniel Arap Moi. But then remembering again that Musalia Mudavadi comes across as a Mwai Kibaki, somebody who looks harmless, so much so that even if you bring in agenda item 2 there of implementing TJRC, the people from central Kenya and other places will say, Musalia Mudavadi will never advocate for us to be uprooted from our land and so forth.
Does that make him then the most potent?
So he's the most potent, and with the running mate of Kalonzo Musyoka, and then creates the east-west kind of arrangement, and you create a balance of that candidature. However, having listened to the speech by James Orengo yesterday, you remember him alluding to some American presidents in terms of, I think, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and others. And then when he said that these four gentlemen can actually lead in the same manner, he started with Raila Odinga, and then Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, and then lastly Moses Wetangula, and said they can lead also in that particular manner. Remember, James Orengo is no ordinary person. If it was coming from any other person, I would have thought then this is not list. But this is a very seasoned lawyer and the man who is on top of the negotiation in terms of bringing on board the candidature. So it is likely that the candidature that we are looking at has Raila Odinga on top.
All right.
And therefore, you ask the question, which candidature or candidate is a real threat to the Jubilee coalition? That is Honorable Raila Odinga, without question, and Kalonzo Musyoka as a running mate.
But that is
and their biggest fear,
that is a replica of 2013.
That is okay,
I don't
but
think Jubilee would be worried about that.
No, they would be so worried if Musalia Mudavadi and Wetangula do not murmur after that kind of declaration has been made. Yes.
All right. All right,
but even if they don't murmur, let me tell you,
you haven't told me which one
be a serious
works.
concern.
All right, then
you know the big question, and I suspect that the committee of 12 that Mr. Mbogwa, as they are likely to refer to as useless, the biggest question they're asking themselves is whether or not the support by Raila Odinga is transferable. Because we know we are told that in 2002 he said Kibaki tosha, and Kibaki ended up being a president. And I guess that's the big question people are asking today. There is followers, loyal followers, most of the time irrational. If he tells them we are running with Musalia Mudavadi, Kalonzo or Wetangula, will they support? Probably yes, probably no. But if you look on the general, and I would agree with Walter for the first time, that if you have Musalia Mudavadi with Kalonzo, then it's going to be a wrap, and Mbogwa will need to look for a job elsewhere because of several reasons. Number one, Musalia Mudavadi, in fact, contrary to popular belief, Musalia Mudavadi is not even a lawyer because he was born and brought up in Baringo. And the historical relationship with the Rift Valley will give him so many votes. And then, for some reason, the Kikuyu elite have demonized Mr. Raila Odinga. When they're discussing about strange animals, bad animals, for some reason, Raila Odinga comes into the equation.
Devil.
You remember Waititu saying that in the unlikely event that NASA takes over, Kikuyus will be requested to put on short trousers, reminding them of the Mau days. You know, that makes people nervous. If you ask Mbogwa right now, why don't you like Raila Odinga? He'll say, I don't like him, but give me the reasons. He doesn't have the reason. So there's been a lot of propaganda. And if you have somebody like Musalia Mudavadi on that ticket, then that propaganda dies. However, I know for a fact that Raila Odinga has put together a system to manage that system of propaganda.
Okay, I need us to move away from that and talk about KANU for a moment for the next 15 minutes or so. But before we do that, let's talk to Jotham calling us from Kanungu district in Uganda. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, how's everything there?
What Kenyan politics?
I'm actually watching you from a very, very funny place called Kitili, just within the forest of Build Impenetrable Forest.
All right, what do you think about what we're talking about, the opposition coalition trying to unseat the Jubilee administration here in Kenya?
Yeah, first of all, as a Kenyan, I would really love to talk as a Kenyan, not just as a person who comes from a certain tribal war. Based on the reality of what we have, Kenya, as we speak right now, is in need of someone who is really focused on principles and achieving the goals that they promise Kenyans. You know, I can see the four gentlemen sitting there with you. Everybody's giving a point as a Kenyan. But it would be very fair to a normal Kenyan on the ground when somebody says that when somebody goes to power or the formation of this is really bad. Remember, the history of Kenya was based on collision. Even from the time we got the independence. So collision is not something that even started in 2002, even though it was stopped in between from 1963. It's been there between our forefathers.
Right.
But because of the mistrust, these things have been existing now and then, and at this time as we speak, it's better we forget about the past and focus about our future, our economy, our security, our social welfare, our education, our infrastructure. And me being in the tourism, I'm really much more touched with how it goes because you can ask me what I'm doing outside here. It's just because of the security that made our tourism go down completely. And
all right. Thank you, Jotham. Jotham, they are calling us from Kanungo in Uganda, of course, making several points there concerning politics back home. He is Kenyan, of course. I want us to leave the issue of the National Super Alliance alone now. We, of course, will be following on that. They are having the next rally in Thika and then another one in another Jubilee stronghold in Meru. We shall be following that for you now. Let's talk about KANU. The Independence Party, rather, did make that long-awaited decision this past week that they will be supporting the re-election of President Uhuru Kenyatta. They did not, gentlemen, speak about supporting Jubilee so much. Maybe I'm wrong, but re-election of President Uhuru Kenyatta. What do you think about that?
Mr. Gideon Moi and Mr. William Samoei Ruto have got historical issues. They've got some things they need to settle. And Ruto is considered as somebody who's just crawled from the woodwork and gotten into the cocktail table without invitation. You recall most of the politicians, even within NASA, they're not his peers. He's much younger and he came from nowhere. He had a pole vault moment where he jumped through the rest and he's seated at the top of the political leadership in Kenya. And his political ambitions are giving everybody a nightmare, including NASA. Everybody in NASA is worried. Actually, part of the reason why NASA is pretending to be united, they know for a fact that if President Kenyatta won this election, Ruto is going to be running the nation for 15 years, for the next 15 years. Because there are even murmurs today that it's a deputy president who is calling the shots. If for some reason today Ruto decides to walk out of Jubilee, Jubilee will collapse and we'll only be reading it in history books. But Gideon Moi comes in a very special position. And you notice a few weeks ago, Mama Ngina went to see retired President Moi, and she claimed that she was going to visit President Moi after a knee surgery. But one wonders why that needed to be publicized. Because, there was no press release issued. It was merely, photo opportunities. Yeah. A few days later, again, we saw President Kenyatta going to visit Moi again in Nairobi. And a deal has been signed. Now, unlike NASA, they've not made it public. But Gideon Moi, at some stage, wanted to be the running mate. Or rather, his father wanted that you're going to be the running mate for President Kenyatta. And that has made the deputy president nervous. Mbogo may not be able to confirm or deny this. But you notice for the last 1 week, the DP was missing in action for some time. When the Egyptian president came to Kenya, and Ruto loves publicity. He was missing from State House. I understand at some stage he was mteja wa simu. When his boss calls, anaambiwa mteja wa simu hapatikani kwa sasa. So it has made the entry of Gideon Moi has made everybody nervous within Jubilee, and it's created a lot of tensions. And that's why in this conversation we've been saying that it's not obvious who is going to be the presidential candidate in Jubilee. Because Ruto has got that machinery, he's got the skills, he's got the resources to upset the apple cart today, and Bogo will be a very delighted man if that happens. But the entry of Gideon Moi has now given Rift Valley a choice. There are people like Kimaio who initially wanted to support President Kenyatta, but feared working with Ruto. They've got a home in KANU. Now they can say because the common factor is Uhuru Kenyatta, we are going to support him. And the people in the other part of Rift Valley, now they have Isaac Ruto with the Chama Cha Mashinani. And you notice a very a strong man by the name of Olentutu, who comes from the Puruko community, the dominant community in Narok, I said he's going to be running on Chama Cha Mashinani. And NASA has indicated they're not going to have a presidential candidate, a candidate for the gubernatorial seat in Narok.
All right.
So what Gideon Moi wants to do, so that I wrap up, and I know Mbogo is really dying to say some things. There's a very high chance that Gideon Moi may end up with 3 governors, one from Baringo, West Pokot, and Elgeyo Marakwet, and a number of MPs. Now, when they go to the negotiating table, it's going to demand for Elgeyo Marakwet. It's going to be demanding for some cabinet seats.
All right, Brian, is Gideon Moi an option for running mates in 2017?
You cannot compare Gideon Moi to William Ruto in so many factors. As you can see from the previous coalition of TNA and URP, TNA had 89 MPs, URP had 75. TNA had, I think, 9 senators, URP had 11, and 7 governors and 10 deputy governors. So politically, let KANU first win some seats that we can see, because I think they only had 1 governor, 2 elected senators, and 3 MPs, of which 2 of the said MPs came to Jubilee before even KANU came. So let them win something first before you cannot negotiate with something you don't have.
All right.
Or on
You're speaking as a true URP luminary, but KANU, do we know what the deal is?
No, what I can say is simple. These small parties, including KANU, they want survival. And they know from the region they are coming for, if they do not support Uhuru Kenyatta for president, they will not win. Number two, Jubilee and KANU has some history, where the president was the former chairman, the deputy president was the secretary general for KANU, and you remember the former president was the one who endorsed the current president for presidency way back in 2002. So they have some relationship, and I've been telling this much from the longest time in this show that there's no way KANU can go against Jubilee and survive.
Daktari, the retired President Daniel Arap Moi said that KANU would continue to rule this country for many more years in whichever form. Some say even Jubilee is a reincarnation of KANU. But Senator Gideon Moi is a biological son of the retired President. Uhuru Kenyatta is political son, some say, of the retired president. Is there a scenario where the deputy president can find himself with a rug pulled under his feet in the run-up to 2022?
You know, the deputy president is a very brilliant politician, and he realizes that he comes from the hoi polloi background. And you know, when you come from that background, you have to work 30, 40 times more than somebody who comes from a place where there is a silver platter and all the meals have been arranged. And that is why deputy president can actually hold up to 18 meetings in a single day. I don't know if Gideon Moi can do 5. And that is the kind of thinking that the deputy president, in my view, has in his mind. And of course, this is a very, very anticipated move, I think, from the deputy president's angle. And if you look at the deputy president, and I've said this before, look at the way he does his politics, and you look at the 48 laws of power, the deputy president goes through that Robert Greene's book, page by page, law by law. That for him, he doesn't like having opponents and people who may likely to mushroom. And he likes courting attention. The other day when there was this story of Baba Abi and so forth, he embraced it, because for Deputy President, attention is something that he prefers on his particular table, because it adds value for him. And so I'm not seeing any scenario where Gideon Moi is likely to come and overshadow him, or a rug is pulled under his table, ostensibly because that is anticipated, and I do not think that he is going to let the cat out of the bag. And just to maybe mention something that Dismas undertook, that you see, you can court attention by action or inaction. And I'm thinking that the silence and the going to church without security and being Mteja, you know, it's also courting attention, as it has been canvassed very well in the 48 laws of power.
What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, Ben, I do not wish to spend much time on KANU. I'm sure they are opportunistic, and I'm sure Gideon Moi must have looked at the lineup, and he knows who will be their candidate now, 2022, and much afterwards.
All right.
And NASA was not interested in KANU as such. NASA was interested in Gideon Moi so as to confuse the image that we actually are now being supported by another big
Thank
party.
you.
Yes.
Thank you. Ishmael Nyaribo, lawyer and governance and strategy expert, Dr. Walter Ongeti, and Brian Mbogwa, Jubilee strategist, and our political analyst, Dismas Mukwa. Thank you very much for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
And before we leave you, let's bring you our